plane crash lands at Heathrow doing around 160 miles an hour. Incredibly, no one is seriously hurt.
We have the latest live on what happened and the continuing chaos at the world's busiest international airport.
Good evening. They are remarkable pictures, and it was an incredible escape. We have the full story on today's events at Heathrow.
We'll have the rest of the day's news too. Here's what else is ahead.
Near miss at Heathrow as a British Airways jetliner crash lands short of the runway.
We will, of course, be asking how bad the disruption is for thousands of passengers.
The Boeing 777 inbound from Beijing was on its final approach at Heathrow. Eyewitnesses described it coming in very low and banking sharply before hitting the grass well short of the concrete runway. Wheels flew off as it skidded to a halt. The passengers were evacuated down the emergency chutes.
Now, it's still unclear exactly why it happened, but what is clear tonight is that passengers on the BA plane from Beijing had an incredible escape. Parts of the landing gear are still strewn across the airfield, and one of the wings has clearly been ripped from the aircraft's body.
It happened shortly before 1 p.m, but tonight the plane is still sitting where it ground to a halt, blocking landings at one of the two runways at the airport.
So, we've the latest from Heathrow tonight on what we know about what happened, how it could have happened, and of course what it means for flights in and out of the world's busiest international airport. Our coverage starts with Simon Harris, who's at the scene for us. Simon.
Katie, tonight the big Boeing has been floodlit, so crash investigators can continue their work, so the passengers' remaining luggage can be unloaded, and so engineers can presumably work out how to move the wreck. It won't be easy. As you said, the undercarriage has sheared off. As the plane came into land, on board were 136 passengers and 16 crew. By all accounts, there was no warning of what was about to happen. If the pilots knew they were in trouble, they didn't tell the passengers. Indeed, some passengers said the first they knew that something was wrong was after the landing, and the crew told them to slide down the chutes. It was a near disaster, an amazing escape. The broken Boeing lies surrounded by crash trucks, firefighters and a blanket of foam. This is where flight BA038 from Beijing ended up, just short of Heathrow's southern runway. Muddy gouges in the grass behind it and a trail of debris show the plane's final slide after a 160-mile-an-hour crash landing. Incredibly, there was no fire and just 6 minor injuries on board. The pilot, apparently struggling to maintain height and flying speed, just managed to clear the busy A30 dual carriageway, as well as this road and the perimeter fence, before the plane came down on the grass a couple of hundred yards short of the main runway. The impact tore off the main undercarriage, and the plane, now travelling on its belly and on its 2 engines, skidded along the grass, slewed to the right and came to a halt. The crash was seen by plane spotter David Spalton. He was here by chance, waiting while his girlfriend had a job interview with BA.
Basically, I was just at Marshall Avenue taking pictures of the aircraft as they're coming in on approach. And there's the aircraft in question over here. He came in quite low. I don't know whether he caught a gust of wind or anything, but certainly looking at it, he was in trouble by the time he crossed the main road. And then, obviously, he crash landed and hit the runway, which isn't the best thing to do. But
what did you see?
Quite a lot of sparks, dirt flying around. Within minutes, if not that, probably seconds, once the aircraft has stopped, the emergency slides are out. Within a minute or two, the emergency services were there, and everyone, as far as I know, is hopefully okay.
Air crash investigators have now taken charge of the wreck. They'll inspect the engines. Were they faulty? And the fuel tanks. Did the plane have enough? But most importantly, they'll get the pilot's story. BA refuses to speculate on the cause of the crash. Instead, the airline boss praised the crew.
The crew are very experienced and are trained to deal with circumstances like this. There is a formal investigation being conducted by the Air Accident Investigation Branch of the Department for Transport, and British Airways is cooperating fully with that investigation. It would be inappropriate for me to speculate as to the likely cause of this incident today.
He came in normally, sort of standard angle, but his nose was quite high up, and obviously his tail would be further down. And he did try and correct it, but by the time he corrected it to standard landing, I don't believe he had enough time before the runway. And as a result, I think he hit the grass. As I say, I've not seen up there since it happened, since I got the pictures and obviously that, but I think he hit the grass, and as a result his landing gear came off, and he just sort of skidded straight in and off the runway.
For a while today, Heathrow was closed as the airport's emergency crews dealt with the accident. One runway is now open, but this day of drama has also been a day of utter chaos. Simon Harris, London Tonight, Heathrow Airport.
Jerome Ensink was one of the passengers on that flight from Beijing and spoke to our cameras just a few moments ago. Here's his account of what happened.
Well, there was a brief minute of silence, and then 2 or 3 people came rushing and said that the emergency exit doors had to be opened. The air hostess dealt with it quietly and calmly and opened the door, told us to go off the slides. And yeah, that's what it was.
What was your reaction when you saw the state of the plane?
I think a bit shocked and at the same time relieved. But I must admit that I was fairly calm. And everybody around me was. We walked away from the plane, and then I think that's the moment that you start to realise what actually happened. And it was a very close call. You saw the plane having slided through the grass. The wheels were in the field, completely away from the plane. I think that's the moment when it sank in and you realise that you made a close call. I think, well, at the moment that you stand out of the plane and you look back at the plane and you see that everything is missing and it's flat on its belly, and you see that it's come through the grass, when I get that sunk in. But I can be very dramatic about it, but I've had a lucky call, and that's it.
That was passenger on board, Jerome Ensink. So what exactly could have happened? Let's look more precisely at what we know. BA Flight 38 from Beijing was already in serious trouble as it made its approach into Heathrow's south runway.
Witnesses say the Boeing 777 was banking hard left and flying low, just above surrounding houses.
Amazingly, the pilot managed to miss the perimeter road, the busy A30, coming down just inside the airport, but well short of the runway.
And that impact was hard. The plane gouged deep furrows into the grass as it slid toward the runway.
Of course, the landing gear didn't stand a chance and snapped off on impact.
Engines fared little better, digging into the ground and filling with debris.
Miraculously, after all that, the escape slides were deployed and crew and passengers were able to calmly walk away from that crash landing.
Right, I was just taken how close that all was to those houses just around the airport there. Let's go back to Simon Harris now, who's at Heathrow, and of course, being a qualified pilot, you could have been at the controls yourself. Simon?
Well, perhaps not, Alistair. I'm not sure about that, but as somebody who knows a little bit about flying, my first impression looking at that aeroplane, it may be battered and broken, but my first thought was, what an extraordinary piece of flying, what an amazing piece of flying to get it down practically in one piece. Now, any pilot who's in trouble has one priority, that's to keep the aeroplane flying until he can find a piece of ground big enough to put it down on. Ideally, you want that to be an airport with a runway, and this guy very nearly made it. It was only a matter of yards, but the aeroplane kept flying and got over the fence, got over those houses, he said, got over the road, and managed to get inside the perimeter. There were no big obstacles in the way. So that was tremendous, skillful flying. And as one former airline pilot who's been close to disaster himself, Captain Eric Moody, told us earlier on today, that the pilot here was an absolute hero. But what caused this crash? Well, very difficult to say, but it does appear that there may have been some sort of problem controlling the plane. We've heard eyewitnesses talk about it appearing to porpoise, another one talking about it appearing to bank to the left. That could have been a wind gust, could have been a bit of wind shear or a crosswind, but certainly there appears to have been some sort of problem controlling it, yet they got it down.
Simon, we have to be very careful about this next bit because it's fraught with legal problems. But you know as well as we all do, there is rife speculation tonight that it may have run out of fuel.
Well, that's possibly fuelled, if I can use the phrase, by the fact there was no fire. Now, it does appear that the undercarriage has come up through the wings, the wing roots where they join the fuselage, badly damaged. Those are where the fuel tanks are. So it's possible the fuel tanks, certainly looks like it from our vantage point in the helicopter, looks like there may have been some rupturing around the fuel tanks, but there was no fire. However, It is speculation. That's what people say when they see planes crash. To be honest, I find that very hard to believe. Yes, airlines put their pilots under pressure to travel with the minimum amount of fuel that they need because it keeps the weight down, it keeps the cost down, and they'd rather they bought their fuel at their home airports than at foreign airports. But by law, all pilots have to carry enough fuel to carry out a diversion, and that diversion could be as far away as Manchester for a plane coming to Heathrow, so I find that very hard to believe. But at the moment, all we know is that a plane has crashed and a lot of people have got out alive. There will be lots of speculation until we know for certain what happened.
And there are people who will find out over your left shoulder, trawling all over that aircraft even as we speak. Simon Harris, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Simon. OK, we'd like your pictures, if you have any. Did you perhaps see the plane coming in or the aftermath of the rescue? If so, then please get in touch. The details of how to do that are coming up on the screen now, and we'll leave them there for a few seconds while